tomorrow morning once I upload the video as well. So you might not have to take notes, but there might be some extra little things that come up as we cook, I'm used to doing these as cooking classes, as we talk this evening. So feel free to take notes, feel free to ask questions. All right, can I get a thumbs up if we can see the, awesome. Amy, you're right at the top. You're my, right at the top with the thumbs up. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining me this evening for my sort of Nutrition Simplified talk, my 3 pillars of health. So this is a talk I've been doing, I used to do it in person, and it sort of was born out of my work that I've done with different clients over the years. So let's see if I can, so it's, where are we here? So we're going to cover a couple different things, and as we go through the presentation, like I said, if someone unmuted, as I go through the presentation, if, there we go, there we go. If you have any questions, you can pop them into the chat box and I'll answer them there. I think for some reason my mouse pad isn't showing up, but we might just have to save them for the end. So they will be there as we go along. Maybe I will sign into Zoom on my phone and we can have a second one there. But we're gonna get started. So tonight's talk is Nutrition Simplified, my 3 pillars of health, and we're going to go through them one by one. And then, like I said, we'll answer any questions when we get to the end. So first of all, I know, Geraldine, you were wondering where I went to school, where I learned all of this. So my name is Caitlin, if we haven't met before. I'm a holistic nutritionist and a culinary nutrition expert. So I went to the Academy of Culinary Nutrition and the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. And so the Institute of Holistic Nutrition is located, they have a campus in Ottawa, actually, Geraldine, so there you go, very close to Gatineau. They have one in Toronto, one in Mississauga, and then they have one as well in Vancouver, I believe they've opened up. So there's a few different campuses for the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. There's several other schools that you can attend, but that's where I learned sort of applied holistic nutrition. And I did a sort of compressed, I did it nice and speedy within about a year, and it was really wonderful. It's where I learned a lot about sort of the chemistry, biochemistry behind food and nutrition and how to create therapeutic diets and that kind of thing. But I brought in the culinary nutrition side of my education, and that's where I learned how to actually design recipes, how to create meal plans, how to put on cooking classes and presentations and food demos. So it was really the combination of those 2 programs together that created what I do day to day in my work. So I do lots of cooking classes and I do lots of one-to-one coaching, group coaching, and I used to do, someday hopefully again, retreats and live events. So that's where I did my education. I came to this field, as most people do, because of health issues that I suffered from. So I struggled a lot with anxiety, with depression, with digestive issues and hormonal balances. All throughout my life, I was diagnosed with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is a hormonal imbalance that impacts, you know, your cycle, skin health, hair health, all that kind of thing. I struggled with anxiety, depression. I used to pull out my eyebrows and my eyelashes as one of my triggers for my anxiety. It was one of the things that I did. And it sort of shifted after I completed my master's in English. I took a year off before what I thought I would do was apply to PhD programs. And I moved in with my sister in Toronto who has celiac disease, which is a allergy to gluten. And so when we moved in together, I decided to go gluten-free and I cut it out. I didn't change anything else about my diet. I just moved in, cut out gluten because I knew that it actually makes her very sick if she gets even the smallest amount of cross-contamination. And within about a month or so, without changing anything else, I noticed a lot of big shifts and big changes in the way that I felt day to day. So I mentioned I used to pull out my eyebrows and my eyelashes. I used to have really intense digestive pain, lots of constipation, lots of bloating. I had my hormonal imbalances and struggled a lot with depression as well. And that's not to say those things completely went away with one small change, but they got so noticeably better that I realized there's more to food than just, this idea of calories in, calories out, low fat cheese, rice cakes, exercising for 5 hours and trying to lose weight. I realized that food can actually create it actually creates our bodies and our energy and our health with every single bite. So that's when I switched my trajectory from I'm going to be an English prof to I went to and applied to the Institute of Holistic Nutrition and then did that culinary nutrition expert program. And I never looked back. That was in, I think, September or October of 2011. So a year this fall, or a decade this fall that I've been sort of living this lifestyle. And this presentation sort of draws on a lot of those foundational concepts that I come back to time and time again. There's always fads in nutrition. There's always fad diets. There's always fad foods. There's always these things that, the media loves a story and they love to, scare people sometimes. It gets clicks, it gets attention when they have really big, bold claims in a headline. And we're just going to cut through all that crap. And we're going to dig into the tried and true tested concepts that I've used with my clients over the last decade to build their health and to help them get from point A to point B. So, pillar one that we're going to chat about today is blood sugar balance. This is always one of the very first things that I talk about when I bring on a new client, because without changing the content of what you're eating in any way, just by changing the way that you combine the foods that you eat, you can make huge shifts in your energy levels, in your overall health, and in your inflammation throughout the body just by balancing your blood sugar. So let's dig in a little bit deeper. A lot of people don't realize this, but at any given time in the human body, we should only have about 4 grams, that's one tiny little teaspoon of sugar circulating in our bloodstream. So that's not very much sugar at all. And any more than that is actually quite toxic to the body and can cause spikes in insulin and adrenaline. We'll dig into that a little bit more as we move along. But more than 4 grams of sugar circulating in the bloodstream can actually be quite toxic to our cells. And our body has lots of built-in mechanisms to help bring our sugars back into that healthy level. So I wanted to put a couple of things in here to give a little bit of context of how much sugar or refined carbohydrate we might be getting in common foods that we eat. So for example, one bagel has almost, I think 11 times or more than 11 times the amount of sugar in one serving than we should have in our bloodstream at any given time. A soft drink can have anywhere from 21 grams to 50 grams of added sugar. And a cafe latte can have about 20 grams. So we're getting up to 5 to, almost 12 times as much sugar as we should have in our bloodstream at any given time in one very simple food item. Like, it's very easy to sit down and eat an entire bagel or to drink a can of pop or to have your cafe latte and then still be hungry for more. So what happens when we eat these foods is sugar that can't be utilized for energy or stored gets converted to fat in the liver. And fat in and of itself isn't a bad thing, but fat in the liver can become quite damaging. And so what I often see with my clients is I get them to fill out a food and mood journal when we start to work together. So I get them to keep track for 2 or 3 days of everything they're eating, everything they're drinking, their energy levels, their moods, all those kinds of things. So I can get a nice little snapshot of where they're beginning so that we can work together in the best possible way. And what I see time and time and time and time again is that a lot of people wake up in the morning and they either skip breakfast, which we don't want to do. We always want to have something to start our day off feeling balanced and energized, Or if they're having breakfast, they might grab a coffee and maybe a bagel or a piece of toast, or a bowl of plain oatmeal, or oatmeal with a bunch of maple syrup or something like that in there. So they have this breakfast, and then, they're hungry an hour and a half, 2 hours later, they start to get that little nibbly food craving. If we were at the office, they might be going to the break room, looking for snacks, looking for treats, going to the vending machine, looking for something quick, something easy. They get to lunchtime, it might be a sandwich or some leftovers from the night before. Mid-afternoon tends to hit, and that's where a lot of them hit a wall. So around 2 or 3 p.m., they say, their energy just crashes, and they get kind of headachy, they get really tired, they might get super cranky, and they want to have a nap, like right away. And so what do? They go searching for a coffee, they go searching for something generally carb rich, and to get them through that afternoon slump. And by the time they get home in the evening, their energy's shot, they're tired, they're hungry, they don't really have lots of energy to make a dinner. They might grab takeout or eat more leftovers, or kind of make the same thing that they had for lunch. So what's happening in this scenario is that their body's on sort of a blood sugar roller coaster from the moment they wake up until they get home or from work or go to bed. When we wake up in the morning and we have, maybe a bagel or a piece of toast or a muffin or a croissant or something like that, what we're eating is almost pure carbohydrate or pure sugar. So in the mouth, what happens is we start to break down sugars in the mouth. So we break down those simple sugars. You might notice, say you have something like a cracker, which isn't generally a sweet food. The more you chew it, the more it might taste a little bit sweet in the mouth. And that's because we start to break down the sugar molecules in the mouth, and then it goes right to the belly. We kind of chew it up, goes to our belly, and we don't really do any digestion of carbohydrates in the stomach. So that food physically doesn't stay in the belly for a very long time, because there's not really much work for our stomach acid or the digestive enzymes in the stomach to do. So we eat that food, it leaves the belly pretty quickly, and what happens is we release from the belly to our small intestine something called chyme, and that's basically just our chewed up food. And if we're having a bagel or a muffin, that chewed up food, that little digestive bolus, is pure sugar. So we chew it, it leaves our stomach, gets to the small intestine, and we get this big spike of sugar. And because it's basically pure sugar flooding our digestive system. And generally speaking, it's more than 4 grams. So the body, like I said, is really very, very smart. And what it will do is produce a hormone called insulin. And insulin's a great hormone. It gets demonized a lot, but it's very necessary because it's our storage and our growth hormone. So what it does when we eat this food and it kind of leaves the stomach is it sends that signal to the pancreas, time to produce some insulin. We produce a big spike of insulin, and that helps to clear the sugar from our bloodstream. And it generally, it'll grab it by the little hand, take it to our liver, take it to our cells. The insulin knocks on the door of our cells, and there's little insulin receptors there. So there's a receptor, the insulin comes and sits into that receptor, and it sends the message, okay, open the cell, and the sugar goes into the cell and gets stored as energy. But what happens if we're eating sugar almost constantly, every couple of hours, all day, every day, throughout our entire life, is our cells get full. And so that's when we start to ignore that message of insulin. So the insulin comes to the receptor, tries to get in, and it's like someone coming to your door, ringing the doorbell, and you just pretending you're not home. You don't pay attention to them. And so what happens is the body produces more insulin and more insulin and more insulin to try to ring that doorbell and get the cell to open up and take in more sugar. And so if we're doing this all day, every day, we eat our meal, we get that big spike of sugar, we get that big spike of insulin, we get that crash. So we often overcompensate, we produce too much insulin, we get that crash. We look for that sweet because our body's very smart, and we will often crave something sweet. We're looking for that treat. What happens? We get another spike of sugar, we get another spike of insulin, we get another crash. So that's happening 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. And that's where we start to turn off those insulin receptors, because there's only so much space in the cell to store sugar as energy. And what happens when we run out of room is we start overproducing insulin, and then the sugar gets converted to something called triglycerides in the liver. And if we do that over years and years and years and decades, we can see the development of something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So we want to cut that off at the pass. We want to prevent that from happening by keeping our blood sugar really nice and stable. So one of the main causes of our blood sugar imbalances, refined grains and sugars. So these are the things that are, the white flours, the cookies, the baked goods, the muffins, all those types of things. Pastas are a big culprit. All these foods contain high amounts of sugar, and liquid sugar is another really big one. So that's in a lot of soft drinks, and it's in a lot of, caffeinated beverages you might get from places like Starbucks. So those are the places that we tend to get a lot of sugar in the body. And what we want to do is start to balance that out. So we're getting this chronic elevation of blood sugar. We're getting that spike. We're getting that crash. We get hungry. We get hangry. We get cranky. And what happens over the long term, we can become insulin resistant. It can turn on an inflammatory response. And those sugar molecules, because they can't get stored in our cells, start to bind to fats and proteins in the body. So it starts to interfere with molecular and cellular function. So that's why when we see people who may have unregulated diabetes, they get eye issues, they might get neuropathies, so they lose sensation in their extremities because we're getting those sugars binding to cells and nerves and causing damage and preventing our body's ability from doing its job properly. So luckily, it's pretty easy to balance our sugars. We want to bring in proteins and we want to bring in fats, and we want to focus on those complex carbohydrates. So we want to look at bringing in a source of protein, a source of fat, and a source of complex carb or fiber with every meal and every snack. If you're in a pinch, 2 of the 3 will do. So say you just combine like a protein and a carb or a fat and a carb, that's still going to help balance your sugar quite a bit, because instead of eating something that's almost pure carbohydrate and having it leave the belly really, really quickly, when we add in a fat and we add in a protein and we add in a fiber, it takes a lot more time and effort and energy for those molecules to get broken down. So food stays in the stomach for a physically longer amount of time. And then when the food starts to leave the stomach, it's a combination of these proteins, these fats, and these complex carbohydrates and fibers that take longer and more effort to break down. So instead of getting that big spike of sugar, we get, a nice little gentle rise, because we do want a bit of a rise after our meals. We need that food and that energy to build muscle cells and to store energy in our tissues and do these important things. But it's when it becomes too extreme in either direction, that's where we want to take a little bit more control. So looking at bringing in a protein, and that can be plant-based, that can be animal-based, nuts, seeds, legumes, beans, poultry, eggs, all those different types of things are proteins. And then healthy fats, so avocados, olive oils, nuts, seeds, coconuts, one of my favorite, those types of things are bringing in that healthy fat. And then for fiber, basically any whole grain is going to have the fiber still intact. We're going to get fiber from fruits, from veggies, nuts and seeds, beans, legumes, whole grains. Those things are all going to be a really nice package that will help your blood sugar stay a little bit more stable throughout your day. So when in doubt, combine at least 2 of the 3 macronutrients. So protein, fat, fiber, and or complex carbohydrates. It doesn't look like I'm able to access the chat for now, so we'll save the questions for the end. Sorry about that. But I know that is quite a big topic, so happy to chat a bit more about it if there's more questions at the end. So maybe just jot them down or pop them in the chat now, and then I can look at them at the end of our presentation. So pillar 2 is one of my favorites, and it's the incorporation of healthy fats and oils. So fat has been demonized for decades and decades and decades. And I could get into the complete history. It might take me a while. I have a book, it's about this thick, that outlines the way that nutrition scientists sort of missed the ball or dropped the ball on this concept of the diet heart health myth and this idea of saturated fat and cholesterol clogging the arteries and causing heart disease and causing cardiovascular disease and stroke and that kind of stuff. So it all boils down to this man named Ancel Keys and his 7-country study. He had this hypothesis that countries that ate the most animal products and saturated fats and cholesterol would have the highest rates of heart disease. So he went about collecting data to try to prove that point and see if that was true. And he published this study with 7 countries that showed, okay, yeah, no, like this looks like it tracks in the right direction. These countries eat more animals, they have higher cholesterol, higher rates of heart disease. What he didn't say is that he actually looked at 21 countries, but 14 of them didn't fit his hypothesis. So he was like, we'll just cut those out. But at that point, the government kind of got on board and was like, oh yeah, this logically kind of makes sense. Because when we think of clogged arteries or heart disease, we have this image, this picture of fat kind of lining the edges and making them smaller and closing off and restricting blood flow. And so cognitively, people were like, yeah, this makes sense. Let's roll with it. And so studies trying to prove this point got lots and lots of funding. And studies that perhaps proved that, you know what, it's not actually fat, it might be sugar causing the issue, got demonized. They didn't get published. They didn't get a lot of funding. That is a very, 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 very basic overview. If you're interested in more, I can share some books in the chat at the end that really go into more detail. But that's the very basic premise of why all the way up until, just a few years ago, everything was low fat, low fat, low fat. All we wanted was low fat foods. It was the craze, especially in the 80s. And it's one of the things when I work with my clients that we really spend some time discussing is this concept of, you know what, fat isn't the thing that's going to make you sick. Certain types might, but for the most part, the fats that have been demonized and vilified are not going to be causing those issues that we've been told they're going to cause. And so learning to get comfortable with healthy fats and learning about the different types of fats is sort of my second pillar of health. And we're going to dig into it here because there are absolutely certain fats that can upregulate inflammatory pathways in the body. And we'll look at those in a bit more detail in a moment. But then there's also fats that can really help modulate. So that means balance out inflammation in the body. So they help kind of turn off those inflammatory cytokines. So those are specific molecules that kind of cause the inflammatory process in the body. So there's certain fats that can turn that off or help regulate or modulate it. And then fats we need to build literally every cell in our body has some lipid membrane. It has lipids in generally the outside part of the cell. And we want to eat the right types of fat so that those cells are permeable, the right things can get through. So we talked a bit about, that insulin messenger coming and bringing sugar and glucose to the cells. Lots of different things need to get into and out of the cells in order for them to do their jobs. And we want to be using the right types of fat to build the right types of cells. And then the brain, our big, beautiful brains, are super fat. They're about 60% fat by dry weight. So if you took out like the water weight, about 60%, I don't know why I say percent of the brain is made up of fats. And so if we want to have a really healthy, really juicy, delicious, strong, happy brain, we want to be feeding it the types of fats that it needs. So there are certain fats, absolutely, that can cause inflammation in the body and that can cause sort of that upregulation of those inflammatory molecules. And those, generally speaking, are going to be what they call vegetable oils, but actually all come from seeds or legumes. There's not a vegetable in the list. And so the reason these fats are ones that we don't really want to incorporate on a regular basis, and when I share this information, I'm never, being a diet dictocrat, like you can never have them ever, ever, ever again, or you're going to be sick and unhealthy for the rest of your life. Absolutely not. It's about, okay, most of the time, when I'm cooking at home, when I'm doing things at home, I'm going to eat fats that are really going to promote a healthy, balanced state in the body. So then when I go to restaurants or I eat out or I'm at other places and they use these types of fats, it really doesn't matter because my foundation is really solid and really great. So I never want anyone to leave a talk or a presentation scared to eat these foods. That's not the point. It's about learning and educating and figuring out, okay, which ones are going to give me the most benefit, the most nutritional bang for my buck, and which ones might I want to avoid for the most part. So the number one that I recommend are these vegetable oils. And the reason being is that they contain an unhealthy ratio of our omega-6 to omega-3 polyunsaturated fats. So these fats are essential fatty acids. We need them. We can't make them in the body, but we need them in the right ratio in order to keep that inflammatory pathway from turning on. And in the research, they've looked back historically and evolutionarily, we would have been getting about 4 parts omega-6 to 1 part omega-3 in our general diet that we had been eating for, thousands and thousands of years. Generally speaking, we would have had about 4 parts omega-6 fat to 1 part omega-3. What happens now, because these vegetable oils are really cheap, they're often subsidized by governments, they're easy to, well, not easy, but because of all the processes that are in place, they're easy to use in a lot of baked goods, they're used in a lot of restaurants. They're basically, if you're not eating at home, generally speaking, we're going to be using these vegetable oils. And so what's happened is instead of having about a 4-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, we're getting up to 20 parts omega-6 to 1 part omega-3, which can cause deficiencies in those omega-3 oils, which are one of the most prevalent oils in our brain. So our brain loves EPA and DHA in particular. Those are 2 omega-3 fats, and those are the ones our brain loves, 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 takes them right up and builds all of our brain cells with our omega fats. And the omega-3s are the fats that really help to modulate that immune function. So we want to rebalance those fats. We want to, as much as possible, replace these vegetable oils in our homes with healthier alternatives. So that, like I said, when we're out and about and we're eating at friends or we're eating at restaurants, which hopefully we can do more of in the nearish future, we don't have to worry because we've got that really great foundation. So the other problem with these oils is that the process of extraction often makes them rancid before they even get onto our plate or into our meal. So they go through a 7-step process to get from little seed or legume to that big jug of oil in the supermarket. And the process of extracting the oil from these seeds generally uses byproducts of the petrochemical industry. So heptane and hexane, they kind of wash through that. They heat them, they boil them, they do this, they do that, and then they generally bleach them and deodorize them so that when you open the bottle, it doesn't smell rancid. I'm sure you've had maybe an olive oil or some sort of oil that you've opened and it's gone off and it has that really strong, like sour smell, like your nose can tell pretty quickly when an oil is rancid. And so they tend to deodorize and bleach these vegetable oils because if they didn't, they would taste absolutely atrocious. So we want to, one, kind of avoid these oils if possible. Some of them, if they're organic or cold pressed, using them here or there isn't going to be a big issue. Like an organic safflower, sunflower oil, or an organic canola isn't a huge deal. But we want to avoid the over-processed, if it comes in a big clear white or big clear jug for about $2 or $3 on the shelf, that's the stuff we don't want to typically invite into our kitchens because that food has gone through that 7-step process. And the thing about the polyunsaturated fats, so those omega-3 and omega-6 fats, is they are sensitive to heat, light, and air. So they go rancid really quickly. So they've gone through these 7 steps and then they're in a big clear bottle. there's basically no nutrition left in these fats. So continuing on with this, the hydrogenated and partially hydrogenated fats and oils are made, generally speaking, from those vegetable oils, and they're used a lot in prepared and prepackaged foods because they're shelf stable. So the polyunsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature, and in order to get a solid fat, they go through that hydrogenation or partial hydrogenation process. So that's where we take that fat, that oil, we heat it to about 248 to 410 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember I said they are sensitive to heat, light, and air. They add a metal catalyst, which is generally a nickel, and then they just boil it. They boil it until it becomes solid. So what happens is polyunsaturated fats are missing carbon atoms at certain points throughout their molecule, and to make them solid, they boil them with the nickel that donates that carbon, so then it becomes solid at room temp. But that process creates trans fats, which are fats that can cause a lot of inflammation and ill health. And I think the States has banned them, and I'm pretty sure Canada has as well. There's unnatural fatty acid fragments, hydrocarbons, and our body tends to see these fats not as a food, but as sort of like an invader. And it's not something they really know what to do with because it's been so adulterated. And in large amounts, and if we're eating it long term, it can cause an immune response. So that's where we want to start shifting away from, you know, these vegetable oils and these hydrogenated and partially hydrogenated oils, and focusing more on these whole food sources. So people always ask me, should I use margarine? No, just go buy some butter. Butter is so much better for you than margarine. Margarine is generally a hydrogenated oil. It's generally a blend of a few different vegetable oils. A lot of them will try to sneak olive oil in now to pretend they're healthy. But if you read the label, it's still mostly a canola or a safflower or a sunflower or some other type of vegetable oil. They're dyed yellow because otherwise they would be a disgusting gray color, and no one would want to eat them. So I always say, take a little bit of money for your budget and invest in like some good butter, organic butter. They often have it at Costco for a really great price. It goes on sale at Sobeys and Superstore. So whenever I see it on sale, I buy a bunch of packets and then just freeze it, because butter is a really wonderful fat to cook with, great for the digestive tract, organic if you can, Canadian milk if you want to, because Canadian milk is great. No hormones or antibiotics used there. We want to use olive oils, coconut oils, avocado oils, a really great one to replace. For omega-3s, we want to look at incorporating hemp hearts or hemp oil. Salmon and cold water fish are great sources of those omega-3s. Almonds, macadamia nuts, walnut oil, these types of foods are going to have a better omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. If they are those omega-3 rich fats, so your flaxes, your olive oil, or your flax, your hemp, your walnut, your almond, all those types of things, don't cook with them because they will go rancid, and we don't want to get a food that's already been kind of destroyed before we even get to eat it. So cooking, we want to use the butters, the olive oils, coconut oil. If you buy, you know, grass-fed animals, you can use the rendered animal fat from those. It's a really solid, stable, saturated fat that doesn't go rancid at high heat. So just like grandma used to do with the big tin can of fat on the stove, if you're buying your animals from healthy sources, that can be a great option for high heat cooking. So again, I'll give you a moment here. If you have questions, I can't answer them right now, but we'll answer them at the end. You can pop them into the chat or write them down, and we can talk about them when we get to the end of our presentation. And so finally, a healthy gut, pillar number 3. So we've looked at balancing our blood sugar, and that's where we don't really need to do much in terms of shifting our diet other than combining those macronutrients. We've looked at subbing out some of those vegetable oils and hydrogenated oils for more health promoting sources. And now we're looking at our gut health. So looking at this pillar, the third pillar, a healthy gut. Because we're not what we eat, We are what we digest, absorb, and assimilate. So if you're eating the most wonderful, beautiful, delicious food every day, lots of veggies, healthy fats, all this good stuff, but you're having constant diarrhea or chronic constipation or bloating or gas or acid reflux or pain in the digestive tract, chances are you're not fully utilizing and absorbing your food to the point that you could be. So you're missing out on a lot of nutrition, and you're probably not feeling great when every time you eat, your stomach hurts. So I could do a whole presentation just on leaky gut. I'm going to touch some of the key points here this evening. But what they're finding is a leaky gut is being found to be at the root cause of many chronic inflammatory conditions, autoimmune issues, and digestive dysfunction. So when we look at the literature, it's referred to as intestinal permeability. So if you're looking it up, you'll want to look up intestinal permeability. Leaky gut's more the layman term, a little easier to say. So they're finding that a lot of these chronic health conditions and issues that we're seeing huge explosions in can be traced back to a gut that is unhealthy, that isn't digesting properly, and that is potentially having some leaky issues. So what is leaky gut? So it occurs when there's gaps or spaces in the wall of our small intestine. So when we have a gut, we all have a gut generally, for the most part. Some people may have had some parts surgically removed, but we start off most of our lives with a small intestine of some sort. And the cells of the small intestine, you can see the photo there, kind of look like these little hands with little fingers. And on the sort of healthy side, there's these tight junctions. So they're pressed really closely together. You can see there's no space between the cells of the digestive tract, so that when we eat our proteins, fats, fibers, we chew them up, we break them down to their single molecule components. Those little brush borders, so those villi and microvilli, absorb those molecules. So the simple sugars, the single amino acids, and the monoglycerides, or single fatty acids, get absorbed through. They pass into the bloodstream. They generally go to the liver, get packaged up, and sent along their way. And we feel great because our body's seeing the food the way it's supposed to enter our system. What happens if we get leaky gut is those spaces between the digestive cells start to open. So instead of being close together and there being sort of a border that prevents large pathogens and bacteria or whole food particles from passing through, suddenly there's that space. And you can see on the other side where it says inflammation, typo, where it says inflammation, that there's spaces, and you can see those little particles passing through. And there's a reason about 70 to 80% of our immune system lives around the digestive tract, because it's one of the easiest places for pathogenic bacteria, yeasts, parasites, food particles to pass through and cause issues in the body. So it's called the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, and it's all around that small intestine. And when we have those spaces between the cells of the digestive tract, suddenly these particles are passing through, and instead of getting, a single protein molecule or a single carbohydrate molecule, suddenly we have a whole big complex that passes through, and our body goes, whoa, hold up. What is this? What am I supposed to do with this? And it sees that item as other. It sees it as, this is not my body. This is not something I know how to use or process. And so it starts to mount an immune response. And so it creates inflammation in the digestive tract. So we turn on that immune response around the digestive system. And over the long term, what can happen is it never turns off. So say we have leaky gut, and things that we might never react to, like maybe a gluten protein or dairy, or for some people, even like tomatoes or strawberries, suddenly starts to set off an immune response every single time you eat them. And if you're eating those once a day, 3 times a day, 7 times a week, that kind of thing, that immune system never gets the chance to turn off. And so we never really get that opportunity to get out of that heightened immune space, pardon me. And so we end up with chronic inflammation. And if it goes on long term, long enough in susceptible individuals, not everybody's going to get this because not everybody is susceptible to autoimmune conditions. But if you are susceptible long term, over decades, years, whatever, you could turn on an autoimmune condition. So we're genetically predisposed to different health issues. Every single one of us is predisposed to different issues, but we don't always flip that switch that turns that on unless there's something in the environment or in our food or in our system that kind of turns on that genetic code and says, okay, it's time. So for some autoimmune conditions, what they're finding is, okay, the one in particular that's really easy to track is Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And what they found is a lot of people with Hashimoto's thyroiditis actually are reacting to a gluten protein. Because when those foods, as we saw here, see they're passing through the gut, and then we turn on that immune response, the immune system makes little antibodies that are triggered when they see that protein again. So if they see a protein that looks like the gluten protein, they go, oh, I remember this thing. I'm going to turn on that antibody, bundle it up, packages up, and try to get it out of here. But the gluten protein looks very, very similar to thyroid protein. So if those antibodies are constantly circulating and constantly on high alert, the immune system can become a little overactive and start to attack our own tissues and our own cells. And there's other factors that can come into play. Like I said, genetics, environment, toxic load, those types of things. But one of the things we can do to stack the deck in our favor and try to prevent that from happening as much as possible is to heal up and seal that digestive tract. So a few things can cause leaky gut. Some big ones are antibiotics. The birth control pill can cause inflammation in the digestive tract, cause that leaky gut to happen. We can get inflammation. So if we're eating something we might be allergic to and we don't know it, we might have inflammation in the digestive tract, and that decreases the tissue integrity and splits those cells apart. High intake of caffeine, alcohol can impact it. Eating foods that are really high in those refined carbohydrates can feed some pathogenic bacteria, which can cause inflammation, leading to that leaky gut. Stress is a big one that they've found. Stress can change our microbiome and change our digestive health very, very quickly. IBS and stress are like best friends, and I won't get into tons of detail, but we basically have a second brain in our belly. So our emotions impact our digestion impacts our emotions. And so stress can play a huge part in leaky gut. And the other one that I want to mention that I didn't add to this slide is actually gluten. The gluten protein the gluten protein causes the body to produce a protein called zonulin, which actually sends a message to open up those cells. And in lots of people, they just close back up again after a meal and it doesn't cause long-term issues. But in susceptible individuals, or perhaps those who already have some compromised digestive function, eating gluten can just open up those doors and lead them open and continue on that path. So looking at how we can support and heal the gut, we want to use probiotics. They're fantastic. They help to modulate the immune system that lives around the digestive tract. They help us digest and break down our food. We want to eat foods like bone broth. That help to heal the gut thanks to their collagen content. So collagen's another great one to incorporate in the diet. We want to bring in, or we want to eliminate, so remove is a big part of it. So we want to remove things that we might be reacting to. So if someone comes to me and we're working together and they're having lots of digestive issues, maybe arthritis, different things like that, we're going to look at doing an elimination protocol to take those things away, and then we'll add in those things like probiotics, bone broth, anti-inflammatory herbs and spices. Marshmallow root tea is fantastic, chia seeds, because of their soluble fiber. So we want to take away any aggravating events. So like our list right there, and specific foods, and then we want to add in the good stuff. And so those are the things that I mentioned. And sometimes if we have a really compromised digestive function, raw vegetables are not going to be good when you're in the healing process. So everyone's always like, raw veggies, raw veggies, raw veggies, eat your raw veggies. If you have leaky gut and you find, oh my gosh, my stomach hurts so much when I eat a salad or when I eat a raw vegetable, it hurts, I get bloated, I get gassy. Because the digestive function isn't optimal at that point and there's some inflammation, all that extra fiber can actually be a little too much for the gut to work through. And so looking at cooking your foods and bringing in lots of soups and bringing in lots of soft veggies and those kinds of things can be a really great way to start that path towards sealing and healing the digestive tract. So those are the three pillars of what I tend to look at when I'm working with clients one-to-one or in a group program. And before we get to questions, I did just want to share, I am offering a small group coaching where we're going to go over these in more detail. So it's a 4-week program with 10 people solely. So we have only 10 people in the group. And every week we look at a different component of nutrition and health. And we educate and we do little exercises so that you can, without having to follow any specific diets or doing any specific, eliminations or this or that, you can get that education and that knowledge to make these shifts. So some of the things that we talked about this evening, we dig into in a lot more detail. So week 1 is our blood sugar balance week, and we get really deep in there. We look at cortisol. We look at, okay, what exactly are the macronutrients? How do we combine them? How do we use them? How do we create that balanced plate? We look at bringing in, okay, what is cortisol? How does insulin impact the body? What do we need to do? And when should we be eating to keep our blood sugar stable throughout the day? Week 2 is all about those fats that we talked about. So we go into more detail about brain health and cellular health. We go into detail about what do we sub? So which ones do we use in which cooking preparation? How do we use these different fats? And you get a little exercise that you get to share with the group, little homework assignments every week to show that, we're just taking these little habits and building them. So we dig into this information in our group setting so that, we have these small, we have this small group and you've got this accountability that, oh yeah, we're meeting up on Thursday. I got to make sure that I try my one new healthy fat this week and then share how that goes. Week 3 is all about probiotics and leaky gut and the enteric brain and nervous system. So that stress, digestion, leaky gut link. And week 4 is that building the anti-inflammatory food pyramid. So that's the week where we take everything we learned and we look at what works for me. What does this look like for my life? Maybe I want to build a vegetarian food pyramid. Maybe I like to eat more paleo. Maybe I just want to bring in more vegetables. How do I do that? And what does that look like? So that's kind of what the 4 weeks are going to be. And so we have our group coaching call every Thursday at 8 p.m. Atlantic, so 7 p.m. Eastern. And I think if you're in BC, it's 4 p.m. So we have an hour-long coaching session every week with me and then the other 10 participants. And then we have our private Facebook group where we share our homework assignments, we share our wins for the week, we ask our questions. So it creates sort of this community around it and makes it really accessible for people who want to learn about nutrition, but perhaps aren't really looking for that one-to-one, super intense protocol that I tend to do with my clients here. So you can see we get handouts every week. We have our Zoom discussions. We've got our weekly action step exercises, and then places to share our experiences, recipes, and struggles. It starts next Thursday, so March 11th, and runs every week till April 1st. Time commitment's about an hour a week, and then 10 to 30 minutes for the exercises, depending. You can add more in if you'd like. No more than 10 people to keep it small. We want it to be a place where we can actually really connect with one another and get to know each other. So I'm capping it at 10 people. It's $100 for the full 4 weeks for the full month. and you don't have to share. A lot of people are like, oh, do I have to talk about like my health struggles? No, you don't have to share anything that you aren't comfortable sharing. I do send out an intake form from me to get to know your health history, just to make sure that I don't make any recommendations to anyone that isn't going to be completely safe. But not all of that is confidential between me and the person who joins. So that is starting next week, and I want to stop share now so that I can look at these questions. Let's see here, where'd we go? So I can pull up the questions in the chat, and if you have a question and you actually want to just ask it, I'm happy to talk about it as well. And I do have a link for the small group coaching too, if you wanted to look at it. Where'd it go? All right. Okay, so questions, comments, concerns. I do see, oh, Janice has a question. I'll just pop the link to the group coaching in the chat. So vegan margarine, yay or nay? This Ukrainian gal loves butter, however, have recently discovered a dairy intolerance. What are my butter options? Amazing, amazing question. And so if you have a dairy intolerance, something that I love is ghee. So ghee is a fabulously healthy dairy fat, but what it is it has had the protein and the carbohydrate sugar, so the lactose sugar and the casein, removed. So it's basically been clarified. What they do is they take butter, they very, very gently heat it, the milk proteins and the sugars float to the top, they skim it off, and then they strain it, and so you're left with the pure fat. And it's a beautiful golden yellow color, incredibly healing for the gut, so good for the digestive tract. It's got short chain fatty acids like butyric acid and vitamins A, D, E, and K, so our fat soluble vitamins. So ghee or clarified butter is 100% what I would recommend as a dairy-free alternative to butter, because like I said, all that protein, all the carbs are gone. If you are a vegan if you are vegan, I know there is a vegan margarine that's not terrible that I've looked at, and I think it's called Melt. It's so if anyone's here is vegan and is looking for like a vegan butter alternative, there's one called Melt. It's not the absolute best, healthiest thing you'll ever eat, but it's also not really going to cause, it's kind of a neutral option. So that's great. I don't promote milk, Geraldine. I promote butter, which is a really great healthy fat. I don't generally drink, I don't drink milk, and I don't tend to promote milk. For most people, it is quite inflammatory. Lots of people can digest, yogurts, because a lot of the the lactose has been digested out, but there is a specific protein in dairy. So when I'm working with clients one-on-one or in groups, we generally do a gluten and dairy-free elimination with a reintroduction period, because there is a protein called casein A1 in dairy that can turn on inflammatory pathways in the body. So if we are already struggling with inflammation, we're getting a little visitor here, or looking to heal the digestive tract, taking out dairy can be a really great way to sort of speed that along. Okay, Cook Mella, I'm not sure your first name, but do you have a preference of almond, rice, or soy milk? So my preferences in order go coconut, love coconut. And then I found a really great macadamia nut milk at Costco that is really affordable, which shocked me because macadamias are very expensive. It's called Milkadamia. And I think they also plant a tree for every like carton sold, or plant trees with proceeds. So I like coconut, and then macadamia. It's got a great fatty acid profile as well. And then I like almond milk. I don't do much rice milk just because there's not tons of nutrition in rice, and I think there's better options that you could use instead. And soy, I don't often recommend just because of the, get your butt out of here, just because of the phytoestrogen content. So soy can be quite high in something called phytoestrogens, which in some people can cause hormonal issues. There's some research that postmenopausal women can be okay with that amount of phytoestrogen in their diet. But if you're having, soy milk every single day in your lattes, you might be taking in very big amounts of phytoestrogens. So I like to say, rotate through different types instead of focusing on one specific milk or food. So like I'll do coconut one week and then I'll do the macadamia the next, and then I might do almond the week after. Then you're getting different nutrients, and you're also not going to hopefully get any sort of reaction, because sometimes if we eat one thing over and over and over again, we can start to react to it. So Geraldine, what's wrong with soy? So soy in itself, if you're eating edamame, soybeans, generally not a huge problem. Soy is one of the most genetically modified foods, which means it's very highly sprayed. If it's non-organic or non-GMO, it's often really highly sprayed with pesticides. If it is organic, it does have that high content of phytoestrogen that I mentioned. So that's sort of one of the major things that I look out for. Having tofu once, twice a week, not a big deal. Having tofu twice a day, once a day, every day for your entire life, probably not the best option, just because we don't want to throw off that delicate hormonal balance. Especially estrogen, progesterone, testosterone balance can be really sensitive. But if we cycle through, if we use, have tofu or tempeh, then the next day we might have beans or lentils or legumes. If we're more vegetarian based, we want to rotate through. So we're not just eating one singular thing. With that being said, if you are working with a provider and you are postmenopausal and working on that postmenopausal hormone balance, certain phytoestrogenic foods like tofu and like flax can be used therapeutically, but it's something you actually want to look at. If you're using it therapeutically, look at working with a professional instead of just saying, I'm going to eat tofu 3 times a day for the rest of my life. Because there are certain amounts you would want to incorporate. But that's generally why I don't make soy like a standard daily staple in anyone's diet. And I don't think we should be eating any one thing every single day anyway, but that's why. Oh, thank you so much for coming, Sarah. And I appreciate you taking this time at the late hour to join us. And if we keep talking here, I'll send the recording so you can hop in for any other questions. But thank you for coming. I appreciate it, Sarah. Have a great night. Any other questions? I don't see any in the chat, but you're welcome to.
I don't know if you answered mine. I had to step away. Do you do one-on-one coaching?
I do. So I do one-on-one. I can share the link for that as well. That one is more focused on people who might have a specific health concern that they already know about, that they really want to work on.
Focus on,
The Foundations of Nutrition group coaching is, I feel okay, but I'm confused about what to eat. I'd like more energy. I'd like more knowledge and education. The one-to-one coaching is, I've got really intense digestive issues, or I've got hypothyroidism or a liver condition. And that's where we would dig in and we really look at a specific plan. So we tend to do an elimination style protocol, a gut healing plan, and then we bring in therapeutic foods and some supplementation as well. And we talk a lot education wise about these other concepts, but it's really more focused and drilled down on what you need. And so we can get into a lot more detail. So that I popped the link. Oops, I sent it just to Geraldine. Sorry, I'll send it to everybody.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So that I love to do, and that comes in 4 a 4-session package. So you sign up and you get your 4 sessions. And so we have our intake, we have our first wellness plan, and then a month later we come back, we update, we adapt, we do a second step, phase 2, and then we have our 4th, and that's where we create our maintenance plan for sort of ongoing, this is where I want to be kind of long term. And
that's what I want. All right.
And that one I love. I love the one-to-one coaching. You can really get a lot done in a pretty short amount of time when you really focus in and you're like, okay, I've got this guidance, I've got this step-by-step plan. A lot can be achieved in, a relatively short amount of time. And I love it. It's like a puzzle every time. And I just love it.
Do you have
I saw
right now?
Pardon me?
Are you taking clients right now?
I am. Yeah, I'm taking clients right now. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm looking into next week for intake sessions. I'm already booked up for this week. And okay, Geraldine, so I try to be vegan. Speaking of beans, I've heard there's something, that's probably the fiber. I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but there's a specific fiber in there that can be quite difficult to digest. What is the name of it? It's got an os at the end, but
I can't think of it at the moment.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And so there are ways that
somebody wrote a book about it. Yes,
that makes them way more digestible. So step 1, if you're cooking them from scratch, soak them overnight. So soak them overnight and then drain and rinse them. And then when you actually cook them, you want to maybe add a little sprinkle of baking soda. And then you can add a stick of what's called kombu. It's a type of seaweed, and it's just like a hard little stick of seaweed. And you throw that in, and it actually absorbs the fiber from the bean so that it makes them more digestible and easier to break down. And you don't get that kind of gassy beans, the magical fruit sensation. There's an article my teacher wrote that I'll pull up here as well. It's called How to Eat More Beans and Fart Less. So I'll share that. Janice, I'm so glad you're enjoying the recipes that I post. I love to share them and I love to cook and eat. So I'm happy you're liking them too. Grace, clear information, easy to understand. Thank you. You are so welcome. You might be able to tell I love to talk about this. I could sit here and keep you here for hours. I won't, but I could. I will pull up that article though. And share it with you. There we go. Oh, Megan, tell me. So Megan is the woman who actually runs the Academy of Culinary Nutrition, which is where I did my culinary nutrition expert training. So this is an article she wrote, How to Eat More Beans and Fart Less. I'll make sure I share it and send it out in the email as well. But I'm still a program coach with that school, and it's great. That's where you learn those hands-on skills of, okay, I know kind of what to eat, but I don't know how to make it and how to prepare it. So she's got tons of great recipes as well that you can check out. But this article is awesome if you are not necessarily plant-based, but do want to eat more plant-based proteins in the diet. Learning how to prepare them so that you can digest them and feel good when you eat them is really important. Because if you're eating something and you feel like crap after it, like you're not going to stick with it. So we want it to taste good and we want it to feel good as well. And tasting good is always the name of the game. That's why if you see my recipes, I often 8 cloves of garlic and 2 tablespoons of curry powder. Like, we want flavor in there. We want it to taste good. If we're going to be eating these foods, don't waste my time with steamed broccoli and a roasted chicken breast. We're adding sauce, we're adding flavor, we're adding spice. So I'm glad you're enjoying the recipes. Okay, so Geraldine, what do you think of the keto diet, heavy on meat and fat? So the keto diet is a specific therapeutically designed protocol that was implemented for kids who had refractory seizures. So they used it for children who don't respond to seizure medication. I think it was in the 30s that it kind of got developed. So the brain, like I mentioned, is mostly fat, and it does thrive really well on ketones, which are a byproduct of fat metabolism. So if we're not eating tons of carbs, we're going to produce a lot of ketones instead, and the brain can really function well on those. It is a therapeutic diet that should be used, I think, in therapeutic situations. I don't think that, the regular person on the street really needs to be eating a keto diet. I do think there are healthy ways to do it. If we're eating grass-fed meats, if we're eating those high quality fats, not relying on tons of prepackaged foods, and not just going ham on the fattiest bits and pieces that we can find. We want to, oh, thanks for coming, Barb. Have a good one. We want to make it as healthy as possible. And a lot of people think keto is no veggies. You can eat veggies. You're eating more of those high fiber veggies like the cruciferous, the greens, that kind of stuff. And you are allowed a certain amount of carbs in the day. I don't think it's a great diet for women in particular, because we get we respond quite quickly to what our body reads as deprivations in the environment. So our kind of biological impulse in a female born body with ovaries and female sex organs is to create babies. That's kind of like, whether or not we want them, like that's neither here nor there, but the biological imperative of the female body is to create a safe space to make babies. And when we have deficiencies in specific macronutrients, so either carbs or fats or proteins, or we have a caloric deficit if we're not eating enough, or if we're not eating, so intermittent fasting is another really hot topic again. It was big when I was in nutrition school, and it reared its head once more. But for women, there's all these studies that are like, oh my God, intermittent fasting, it's so great. It helps with cellular regeneration and XYZ. Every single one of those studies was done on men. All the studies that were done on women showed that it had the exact opposite effect, because our body reads that shortened eating window as restriction. It reads the deficits of carbohydrates as restriction and says, oh, there's not enough abundance in the environment right now for me to get pregnant and sustain life. So we're going to down-regulate the female hormone production and kind of balance. And so those diets can be short-term therapeutic in specific situations, with maybe working with a practitioner can be okay. I generally think you can get the same result doing a lot less restrictive and intensive and sort of psychologically restrictive ways of eating. So not the hugest fan, but in certain situations it can be okay. I do find men, generally speaking, tend to do better on like a keto or an intermittent fasting protocol than a female body would. But like I said, I think you can do the same thing with a lot of more balanced approach. So there, that's my thoughts. All right, any other questions? So what would cause someone to feel hungry often? Could it be habitual eating? What do you think? I think that can be quite complex, and generally you have to look at it from a couple different areas. Are you eating when you wake up in the morning? And are you eating enough protein when you wake up in the morning? So that blood sugar balance that we talked about, starting your day with a good source of protein when you first get up is going to help to balance your blood sugar. Are you eating enough during the day? So sometimes we undereat. And we don't even quite realize it. So if I get a food and mood journal from somebody and they've sent it in and they're like, I'm always hungry, sometimes I'll take a look and I'll be like, you work out X hours a week, you running after kids, you're doing this, you're doing that. You're not eating enough to sustain your energy. No wonder you're hungry. So looking at, are you actually physiologically eating enough for your day-to-day activities in your day-to-day life? Looking at, am I hungry because I'm bored? I mean, a lot of us are kind of bored right now. We're locked at home. A lot of our life has been sort of put on hold. We can't make long-term plans. There's probably some mourning that's happening as well, and a little bit of grief. Food is comfort. Food is a beautiful thing that can be very, very comforting. And I don't think that, using it as a little bit of a self-soothing tool on, you know, here and there on occasion is a bad thing. I think that if you're eating and you're eating yourself sick and you're not feeling good, like if you're eating so much that your stomach hurts and you feel really bad, then we want to maybe look at what could be triggering that. But if you're like, you know what, I'm bored, I want to eat something I love and watch a movie, freaking go for it. Being really tired could also, when we're tired, our insulin regulation drops, and so we can get more hungry the next day, and our hunger signals. So when we get a night of poor sleep, I think it's ghrelin, which is our satiety signaling hormone, drops. And so we become little nibblers, and we just want to eat everything because we're really tired and we need that energy. So looking at sleep, looking at stress, looking at habit. And I think a big one is looking at what am I eating during the day? Am I keeping my blood sugar stable? Because that can make us really habitually snacky, is if our blood sugar is not super stable. And making sure that we're eating, you know, within the first hour of waking up, and eating something with some good protein and those healthy fats in there. So it's sort of an experience. There's no like one answer, but you can kind of, from what I said, be like, oh yeah, that sounds like me, and kind of play around and look at what you think. Carol, so can you tell us more about marshmallow root tea? Yes, I can. It's a really lovely tea. As the name says, it's a root. And what it does is it creates it's got this gross sounding word, but mucilaginous fiber. And the mucilaginous fiber is really soothing to the digestive tract. So when we've got a lot of inflammation in the small intestine, when we drink the marshmallow root tea, it can actually protect that small intestine, so that as we're healing and eating these foods and lowering inflammation, we're sort of protecting the lining of the gut at the same time. It also, like I said, has that soluble fiber, that mucilaginous fiber, and that actually helps move food along. It gives our small intestine something to kind of squish and press through, so that it helps improve digestive tone. And like I mentioned, really soothes and can protect the digestive tract. In herbal medicine, it would be what is called a demulcent herb. I've got a really great herbal book. Let me see here. So this little guy here, the holistic, can I get it to see? There we go. Holistic Herbal by David Hoffman. It's a little, there we go. Holistic Herbal by David Hoffman. So this is a really great one, and it goes through, oops, my little ivy plant here. It goes through the different systems, so like circulatory, respiratory, skin, nervous system, glandular system, and then it also goes through a lot of the most popular herbs, what they are, their different actions, and like how to prepare them, how to gather them, the chemistry of them, the different actions. This is the book that we used in my herbal medicine class at nutrition school, and I use it when I make plans all the time. This is like a well-thumbed guide full of my notes. I don't know if you can see, covered in writing and notes there. So that's a really great book if you're interested in herbs. And I love using herbs within my protocols and in my plans, because they can do so much without having to take like huge amounts. We don't always need like a huge therapeutic dose. Sometimes we can do small daily doses and really support the body. So just with a tea, we can make a really big difference, or with like a little tincture that we take, or even using it topically or aromatically with a little, the volatile oils from certain herbs like lavender in particular can help calm that nervous system. So if we're feeling really stressed or really overwhelmed, that lavender, just kind of waving it under the nose, can help relax us. Peppermint, so good for IBS and digestive function. That's one. I drink peppermint every single day. It's like my favorite herb, and super cheap, easy to find everywhere. But yeah, herbs are great. Holistic Herbal.
Yeah.
If you're interested.
What was his name, please?
His name is David Hoffman. I'll type it in the chat. David Hoffman. There we go. And it's called Holistic Herbal. Yeah, so that's a nice little handy reference to have, and it's got pictures of them, and it's kind of a pretty book too, and lots of really great information. All right, any other questions? Fabulous. Well, thank you all so much for joining this evening, taking time out of your night to come and sit and chat and learn about food and learn about nutrition. I really appreciate you coming here and showing up and being interested and asking questions. And I will send out the recording tomorrow and the handout, and I'll send out a couple of the links to that article in the book maybe, so that you can check those out if you need them. And if you have any questions, just hit respond to one of the emails that I sent you, and I'll get back to you. Carol, what was the name of the West Coast school? Pacific Rim College. So that's the one that my friend went to in Victoria. The Institute of Holistic Nutrition has a campus in Vancouver, and then there's another school, the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, and they do online. So if you, depending on where you are, you might not want to move somewhere, or you might not have a school close by. The Canadian School of Natural Nutrition does a holistic nutrition certification, and I think you can do it all online. I've known a couple people who've gone through and done that program, and they're great nutritionists. So so those are kind of the big three that stick out in Canada. And then the Academy, of Culinary Nutrition, if your interest is really like the food and learning about learning about like they do a foundations of nutrition, they lay the foundation, and then it's like building a healthy pantry, and then every week you kind of learn something different. So that's really great if you're more into that culinary side and have kind of a base of, yeah, I know a little bit, but you want to go deeper, then I would suggest that school.
Oh, it's great. Thank you so much. Can you tell me how to pronounce your last name, please?
Isles.
Isles. Okay, wonderful.
My dad always said rhymes with smiles anytime we went anywhere. Caitlin Isles. Yeah, I've gotten lots of, when I graduated from university, they called me Eyeless. Caitlin Eyeless. All right. So Isles it is. But all right. Anything else before we head off?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, everybody.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Like I said, any questions, hit respond tomorrow, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.